let's go to my next guest. We are joined with easily one of my favorite people to talk to, John Kiriakou. John Kiriakou, he is a former CIA officer. And John, what show are you on now? Because you've been going around doing speeches, which is utterly
Yeah,
fantastic. I'm so happy
yeah,
that
it's
you got that
wonderful.
opportunity. You are easily one of the most fascinating people to listen to.
Thank you, thank you.
Where can people find either your show or where can people find your events?
Well, thanks for that. I'm going to give you four different answers. I've got podcasts on YouTube, one with Michelle Whitty and Ted Rawl, called Deprogram. I have another one. It's an interview show just by myself called Deep Focus. Those are both on YouTube. I've got a TV show on the Unified Television platform. It's UNIFYD.TV, and that's called CIA Declassified. We use original CIA documents to prove or disprove allegations from big world events. And my speaking tour, I'm headed back to the UK for another 2 weeks of dates, starting on May the 3rd in Glasgow, and then finishing in London on May, I think it's the 17th. And that's all at tigerslanestudios.com.
You are a busy man.
It's busy.
You are a busy man.
Busy's good. Busy's
Yeah,
good.
busy is good. I agree with you. Um, to start with something else, I want you on to have a conversation with the Waltz thing, but this broke this morning. At the very least, I saw it this morning. So you remember Donald Trump sends a letter behind the scenes to Iran,
Yes.
and he tells Iran, "Hey, in 2 months, all hell's going to break loose." I'm paraphrasing. All hell's going to break loose if you don't come to the table and have a deal with me
Mhm.
on the issue of the JCPOA, basically a new JCPOA. This is a bit rich since it was Trump that pulled out of the JCPOA in the first place, but put that to the side for the moment. He is effectively threatening ostensibly military action if they don't come to the bargaining table. Now, Iran has said this is nonsense. The notion that you're even put this out here is insane. We're not going to negotiate with you under threat. From my understanding, Pezeshkian, and I even had the speech of him wanting to negotiate with the United States, but effectively saying, look, I would align my position with the Ayatollah. He is the one in charge. So fair enough. We don't need to do negotiations. Fast forward to today, where apparently it is being reported that a letter was sent back to the US
Mhm.
through Iran, from Iran, saying, well, they're not really telling you what's in the letter, but the reporting is that Iran is willing to negotiate behind the scenes in a de facto sense. My
Mhm.
question to you, considering you wrote the book on Iran, and so, what is it? I will find the name for it. In fact, I
Oh,
think I have the name for it right here.
yeah, the
It
CIA
is
Insider's Guide to the Iran Crisis.
the CIA Insider's Guide to the Iran Crisis. Right, I have it right here. So, what do you think this conversation is about? I find this to be maddening to me. Iran wants to negotiate. It's like saying, I have a blue car. You want to buy a blue car. And then I tell you, if you don't buy this blue car, I'm going to punch you in the face. And it's like, dude, I already want the blue car. Why are you threatening me? And I can't buy the blue car from you if you're threatening me to punch me in the face. It's like a deal is on the table to be made. There are elements of the Iranian government that wants to make it, but Trump wants to take this from a position of strength in any negotiation as opposed to just making a negotiation with something that Iran wants to negotiate. What do you think is in that letter back to Trump that is being sent through a third party? And the second question, I'll piggyback. If Iran is saying we won't negotiate under threat, third party negotiation is still negotiation.
Yes, true. I think that the letter coming back to Iran through the Omanis, not through the Emiratis, who received or who delivered rather our letter to the Iranians decided to answer through the Omanis, who historically have been the middleman for us with
Mhm.
Iran. I think the letter tells Trump to grow screw himself. The Iranians, listen, this is a vastly different time than it was 8 years ago. When Donald Trump first became president and pulled out of the JCPOA, Iran was in a certain way. Well,
Mhm.
now the Iranians are far closer to the Russians, far closer to the Chinese, have robust trade relations with most European countries and with the biggest economies in Asia. They don't need the United States. It's a different time. It's a different Iran than it was then. They don't need peace with the United States. Things are good just the way they are for the Iranians. And another thing too is oftentimes we trick ourselves into thinking that the elected president and the Majlis are in charge. They're not in charge. Ayatollah Khamenei is in charge. And if he wants negotiations, they'll take place. If he doesn't want them, they won't take place. It's really as simple as that. Now, I want to add one thing.
Please.
We learned in General McMaster's memoir that came out after Joe Biden was elected president that in the very beginning of the Trump administration, Donald Trump spoke openly in these internal meetings about using a nuclear weapon against North Korea. McMaster said that he was absolutely appalled that these thoughts were even being vocalized. And McMaster says that he said to Trump, what would really throw them is if you tried to engage them in diplomacy. And so that was the start of the so-called love letters. I'm wondering if Trump, declared victory in terms of diplomacy with North Korea, even if it didn't amount to anything in the end, and that he's bullying the Iranians now so that he can then offer a summit, whether with Pezeshkian or Ayatollah Khamenei, which isn't going to happen.
Oh, I bristle at the North Korea thing. I've heard somebody else make that comment that nothing came of it. I so disagree. I mean, the North Koreans were firing missiles into the Sea of Japan. The United States, Japan, and everybody else was freaked out by them doing so. Trump engages them in diplomacy. They stopped doing it. They even blow up, I guess you could say it was optics, but whatever. They even blow up elements of, it's not the nuclear site or whatever, but they blew up something. I don't remember. It's so vague in my mind now. But Trump got them to stop doing that. He shook hands. He stopped doing the military exercises on the sea. South Korea had even started talking about reunification. These were positive developments. When Joe Biden got into office, Joe Biden wiped all of it away.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me why I'm wrong.
No, you're 100% right. Yeah, Joe Biden was the one that did away with it. And Donald Trump, by all accounts, Donald Trump is obsessed with the idea of winning the Nobel Peace Prize. And so on the one hand, maybe that's enough of a motivation to actually reach out, either directly or indirectly, to the Iranians. On the other hand, he made a statement about the Houthis in Yemen just 2 or 3 days ago, in which he said that if we keep bombing the Houthis and they keep attacking either us or shipping, that we're going to bomb Iran. Now, do we really want to do that? Iran is an enormous country with an enormous army, and all of its sensitive facilities, whether military or nuclear, are deep underground. Are we sure we really want to get into something like that? Yet another war in the Persian Gulf?
Now, I've had a military guy on the show that said Trump would hit Iran with nukes. I'm not going to say his name. The audience knows that Trump is going to hit Iran with nukes, that they're going to be tactical nukes, and that it's going to destroy all of their facilities in one go. And as I pointed out to him, military people say stuff like this all the time. It's never true. Yeah. Never true. I remember when John F. Kennedy was having a conversation with Eisenhower, where Kennedy called Eisenhower because they were in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he says, hey, what do you think? Is Khrushchev bluffing? And Eisenhower was like, yeah, he's bluffing. He's not really going to do it. Khrushchev was not bluffing. He wasn't bluffing. No. And this idea that, oh, we're going to do a bombing strike and we're going to take out everything is nonsense. I don't buy it, the premise.
No. And how many times are we going to go through something like that, where we had General Schwarzkopf say that we're bombing Iraq back into the Stone Age, and then we ended up barely affecting their military. Mm-hmm. This kind of thing happens all the time. There are so many people in senior policymaking positions in Washington that just have no understanding of history. They just don't get it. And so they think that they're the first ones to ever say, oh, you know what would really be effective? If we carpet bomb Iran, because there's no way they could bounce back. There's no way they could defend themselves. Well, of course there is. Yeah. And then we're dragged down into another decade-long or 2-decade-long war.
With a country 3 times the size of Iraq. I mean, Richard Nixon, had a secret plan to end the war, and the secret plan was more bombing.
Yeah,
it didn't work.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm. That leads me to another Well, wait a minute. Do I have another question on this one before we move on? So, okay. So I agree with you, by the way. It's very possible that Trump is, see, he has so many hawks in his administration. And the same tactic that he was using with North Korea, same tactic he was using with Russia of, oh, if they don't do this, we're going to have more sanctions or whatever else. That seems to be his playbook. I'm going
Yes.
to escalate to de-escalate. So you don't think Iran would accept Trump coming to Iran, shaking hands, signing a deal, everything's great in the North Korea style of things?
No, I think if there were to be meetings, it would likely be at the technical level. So, Iranian experts and American experts would meet in, let's say, Geneva or Dubai or something like that. I can't imagine Donald Trump would dare step foot in Iran, even if he were invited to do so, because he's so universally hated, so universally reviled for the killing of Qasem Soleimani during his
Oh, right.
first term. They
Good
would
point.
want Trump's head in Iran.
Good point. Oh, that's such a good point. That leads me to Yemen. Um, in the most hypocritical, radical hypocrisy that I've ever seen, we are saying, well, the Houthis, because they're bombing ships in the Red Sea in order to push back against genocide, or Ansarallah, whatever you want to call it, we believe that Iran is helping the Houthis. And so if the Houthis keep doing this and we can't stop them, we will hit Iran as if these things are one to one. Now, this is outrageous considering we've been arming Ukraine to the teeth. And we've been arming Israel to the teeth as they committed genocide. So it's a
Yes.
bit rich if we're going to take this
Yes.
point of view, but whatever. The Houthis, from my point of view, Trump is going to look like Joe Biden on this. I think JD Vance is right that what is this going to solve? Like the Houthis have been bombed for the last 10 years by Saudi Arabia when Obama gave the green light for that war, and by Joe Biden himself. Nothing has stopped them from doing what they've been doing. So why do you believe more bombing is going to solve this issue? This brings me to the text messages that came up. I'm fascinated by these text messages. Hegseth is lying through his teeth when he says, oh, this didn't happen. We didn't talk to Goldberg. He wasn't in a meeting, blah, 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 blah. It comes out that Goldberg just releases all of the documents to the text message. One, it's weird that a journalist doesn't release this information right off the bat. He's a journalist. You would think he would do it. And two, all of these people are lying through their teeth. So this is Hegseth after, I believe this was after Goldberg releases all of the documents that he had at his disposal because he was sitting in on the war plans. And let's put war plans in quotes, but he was sitting in on the meeting.
Here to do. Nobody's texting war plans. Well, I noticed this morning, out came something that doesn't look like war plans. And as a matter of fact, they even changed the title to attack plans because they know it's not war plans. There's no units, no locations, no routes, no flight paths, no sources, no methods, no classified information. You know who sees war plans? I see them every single day. I looked at them this morning. I looked at attack plans this morning. You know who does attack plans and war plans? Men like that admiral right there, Paparo for the Indo-Pacific, or Eric Kurilla, our general in CENTCOM. They do attack plans and war plans. And thank God we have those leaders who do it and do it well, and our enemies know it. My job here to do.
John, I think what Hegseth is missing here is that he allowed journalists to sit in on a meeting where they are talking about hitting Yemen. And as he's sitting here in this, like as he's saying this, it doesn't matter if you had the exact details. The fact that a journalist is sitting in on a meeting where he is openly discussing hitting Yemen is rather outrageous. And none of them have really explained how this happened. Give me your take on this. I mean, these are the conversations that Goldberg releases.
Right.
It is wild that the VP, Secretary of Defense, Secretary, I don't know, I think Rubio was on these, I'm not sure.
Yes.
But that all of these high-level people are in this conversation about hitting Yemen. Hegseth even goes further in these chats in this regard. Give me your take on this. This is illegal by definition, right? I mean, the fact that there's a word.
Absolutely, yes. I counted 3 separate violations of the Espionage Act. When I was being prosecuted by the Obama administration back in 2012, the judge in my case came up with a definition of espionage that has become the standard. It is very simple. It is providing national defense information to any person not entitled to receive it. That's exactly what happened in this Signal chat. So first, the fact that they used Signal in and of itself is a violation of the Espionage Act. Because while Signal is encrypted, end-to-end encrypted, it's only encrypted once you hit the send button. It can be intercepted as you're typing it before it's encrypted, right? So violation number 1. Violation number 2 was the fact that that Goldberg was on the chat in the first place. Remember, providing national defense information to any person not entitled to receive it. He's a journalist. He's not entitled to receive it. And number 3, the fact that Hegseth put classified information at the top secret level on Signal was a separate violation. Because even if it weren't intercepted pre-encryption, the information that he gave was top secret, not confidential or secret. Now, there's a difference, an important difference between these classifications. Confidential information, the courts deem as causing harm to the national security. Secret information, the courts deem to cause serious harm to the national security. Top secret information, including all attack plans, cause grave harm to the national security. And when top secret information is revealed or shared with somebody not permitted to see it, the Espionage Act can become a death penalty case. This is a very, very serious crime. Now, with that said, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, yesterday said there would not be an investigation and there would not be a prosecution. Republicans control both the House and the Senate. And the Republicans said yesterday that they will investigate. But you know what, Jamal, even if they do, even if they say, oh, there were separate, multiple violations of the Espionage Act, the Attorney General has already said no one is going to be charged with anything.
John, they put you in a cage for less.
Yeah, they did. They put me in a cage for less, for 2 years.
Outrageous.
Yeah.
And they're yada-yadaing the shit. In fact, Bondi did something worse. She invoked Hillary Clinton's email server. And it's like, oh, we're not going to talk about this. You guys should talk about the email server. It's like, okay, dude, those are 2 separate issues. Those are 2 very separate issues. And Clinton got so much crap for that. And then they come to this where they're literally putting a journalist on the thing. Now, the other question becomes, okay, well, how did Goldberg even get on the chat? Even that part is
that's a great question. Ryan Grimm reported, and I think he hit this right on the head. Ryan Grimm reported that the reason Goldberg got on the chat was because he was in Waltz's phone because Waltz was a longtime source of his. And Waltz just hit the wrong name. Remember, when you're setting up a Signal chat, you can't do it by phone number. You have to do it by name. So the name of the group was PC, which stands for Principals Committee, Small Group, Yemen. So he physically had to go into Signal and create this group and then add people not by number, but by name. And he put Goldberg on.
So effectively, he was a source for Goldberg,
Sure.
a secret source for Goldberg.
Yes.
And in being a secret source, as opposed to him hitting some other name, he hit Goldberg's by accident. He's an old man. He might have had fat fingers.
Yeah.
And Goldberg's name comes up.
Yep.
And Goldberg initially thinks, okay, this is obviously a hoax. This is not who they say they are. But he waits.
Yeah.
And he sees more people come in. He sees more people comment. He sees Hegseth. He sees Rubio or Vance. And he still sits there and he's like, oh, wait, this is legit. They're actually talking about bombing Yemen. And I am on the meeting as they have this conversation. Vance, I'm growing to like Vance. I'm growing to like Vance. Vance pointed out in the meeting, like, look, why are we doing this? Joe Biden did this. It didn't come to anything. 3% of American shipping goes through the Red Sea. This is a European issue. Why do we care? This is none of our business. But I'll be a good soldier. I'll fall in line with whatever you guys come up with. And their rationale was, we're going to send a message. That's their point in doing the bond. We're going to send a message. We're going to show that, we're strong or something like that. This is the level of dialogue that takes place behind the scenes among these people with all of this immense power.
But yeah, insulting the Europeans, not even bothering to acknowledge that the fact that they're having a chat, whether it's encrypted or not, is irrelevant, is a violation of the Federal Records Act. Because remember, any executive branch record is subject to a Freedom of Information Act disclosure. But you can't FOIA somebody's signal chat off their cell phone.
But isn't it? Oh, I see what you mean. But it's still secret, right? I mean, like you wouldn't be able to FOIA this conversation anyway.
Sure, you could.
Really?
You could. And then if the court would order its release, it would have to be redacted.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But if there is no written record that such a chat took place, as there normally wouldn't be, how would you even know to FOIA the chat? And what's to stop any of these participants from just deleting it?
What is normal in regards to communications? How would they normally have this back and forth chat?
Oh, through a classified channel like Cybernet, for example, or classified email, which has been around since 1990. The CIA got classified email in 1993, 1992. Yeah.
So the entire point of this was to be able to delete this chat.
I think that was one of the points. Yeah.
Just wow. Just wow.
I would also add that it is illegal to have a phone, a communications device, in a classified area, whether in a tempested office, like the office of the Secretary of Defense, or in a SCIF, sensitive compartmented information conference room. You can't have a cell phone or a BlackBerry or whatever the heck they were using. That's a separate violation. So we're talking so far 5 felonies, including 3 counts of espionage that were committed during the course of this conversation.
John, that's amazing. And they are yada-yadaing this like, oh, it's no big deal. This is a witch hunt. You guys are just after us.
It's a very big deal.
This is a very serious violation. That's your point.
It is. Yes, indeed.
Do you think, but you don't think any charges, anything is going to come of this?
Not a chance. Absolutely not. No one. I would be shocked if there are any resignations. Now, if these guys had any real class, both Waltz and Hegseth would resign. This is a major security problem. I said in an interview a couple of days ago, this is the biggest security screw up in a generation. And if these guys had any self-respect, they would resign.
Well, that's not happening.
No,
that's not
not
happening.
a chance.
One last question on the CIA. Trump came in like a bull in a china shop and wanted to settle scores. One of the scores he wanted to settle was with the FBI and the CIA. What changes? And you may not know this, but you may have been reading firings, those type of things that have been taking place. Why they say that he effectively damaged the CIA and what he was doing? What was he doing? What they're saying is damaging the CIA.
No, in fact, if you look just under the surface, he's actually shown great support for the CIA. So I think what his critics are talking about in that respect is that 70 CIA officers have been fired, right? So these are 70 officers who had something, even peripherally, to do with DEI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Inclusion, racial equality, gay rights, whatever. fired. These are the first CIA layoffs since 1977 when
Are
Jimmy
you
Carter.
serious?
Yeah. The CIA just gets bigger and bigger. It doesn't get smaller. People don't get laid off ever. So not since 1977. But then within 48 hours of firing these 70 officers, he brought back a legendary retired officer to be the deputy director for operations. Guy was a 7-time station chief. And the kind of CIA officer that everybody, in a younger generation would want to be like.
Oh, they
So if
respect
he
him.
yeah, if he meant to damage the CIA or do harm to the CIA, he wouldn't have chosen this guy to be the deputy director for operations. This was an inspired choice if you're a CIA supporter.
I'm sorry, one last question. My last guest made this point about Ukraine. And there's a lot of conversation about getting rid of Zelensky. Zelensky is a rogue element. Russia has recently come out and says, look, we are not having negotiations with that goofball. He is illegitimate. We consider him illegitimate. The Trump administration, on some level, also is synonymous, or let's say there's a synonym associated with this, even if it's not exact, where Trump is like, want somebody else. They've been looking behind the scenes for somebody else to take Zelensky's place. Andre made the point of saying, look, nothing is going to get accomplished with all of these elements on the ground, these neo-Nazi elements on the ground. And he points out they are funded and backed by the CIA. And as I pointed to him, I was like, but Ratcliffe is Donald Trump's guy in the CIA. You would think that if Trump is in charge of the CIA, that these people would necessarily be there giving money and support to these rogue elements. He says, look, I don't know what Donald Trump is doing on this, but if Donald Trump really wants peace, those elements need to be out of that country. And Trump has the power to do it by giving an order to the CIA to pull out all of those rogue elements. Is he right about this? I mean, because Donald Trump is saying that he wants peace. He's pushing hard on this issue. Zelensky is in power. He is intimated that he wants somebody else in power, that Zelensky is a dictator, that he has 4% approval or whatever, and that they want somebody else. Is it true that it's the CIA and its elements on the ground that are effectively paying for and giving support to these banderites that are allowing Zelensky's regime to A, stay in power, and will prevent any election to take place to be legitimate? Is that true? Trump doesn't have control of
No,
his own
that's
government.
that's seriously overstating the situation. The
Okay.
CIA has been there from the very beginning. It's been providing training and weapon systems and ammunition and logistical support and everything. But there are far fewer actual neo-Nazis than a lot of Russians or people on the American right believe there are. Sure, the president can order the CIA to pull out or to stop cooperating. It's not that big of a deal.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I always thought that the number of Nazis or
Overstated.
neo-Nazis was overstated. Yeah, they're there without a doubt, and we should not have anything to do with them, and we do. So that's wrong. And then on the other hand, you can't go to war with a country and say, yeah, I'm willing to have peace talks, but the country that I'm at war with isn't invited or shouldn't be invited to the peace talks. Come on. To say that this has to be between the United States and Russia is to just pretend that Ukraine is a satellite state of the United States. And it's not. It's not. The Ukrainians are going to have a seat at the table because it's their country that we're talking about carving up. Whether the Russians like it or not, there has to be a role for Ukraine.
Oh man, we so disagree. Let me explain why. Um, do you remember when Joe Biden came out gave that speech where he says, "I told them to fire that prosecutor, or else
Yeah.
I'll pull $1 billion."
I played it like 20 times on my show. Yes.
It is an astonishing thing for somebody to admit that they're doing that. But think of how weak a government has to be for a U.S. president to be able
Well,
to
not
exert.
necessarily. I was walking, I was doing a surveillance detection route on foot once, 25 years ago, with a visiting CIA leader,
Mhm.
and his cell phone rang, and it was the president of a country I can't say which, saying, "Hey, I'm reshuffling the cabinet. Who should I name as the head of my intelligence service?" And he told her, "Pick so and so." And she did. That doesn't mean that that country is a satellite state of the United States. That doesn't mean that the country controls that country's, politics or foreign policy or whatever. It means that we're very influential there and that they'll be deferential and check in with us, but we don't control the country. And I see the same situation in Ukraine. We have outsized influence there. But Ukraine is not a satellite state to the point where they shouldn't be invited to the negotiating table to discuss taking away their territory and turning it over to the Russians. Come on.
From my point of view, it's a proxy war. And the proxy, in this case being Ukraine, the actual combatants in this war is the United States and Russia, with the US giving any and everything to Ukraine to fight that war. I get the sense that if the US pulls out, the war stops, Ukraine collapses. And so the negotiation that needs to take place are between Russia and the US. But I don't.
Yeah, but Vietnam was a proxy war between the United States on one side and Russia and China on the other. Russia and China never participated in any negotiations at the Paris peace talks. It was just the United States and Vietnam.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, good point.
And
I don't know.
if Ukraine is a sovereign country, a member of the United Nations, we can't just pretend that their sovereignty isn't important enough.
But see, I don't believe they're a sovereign country. Like when Zelensky, I give you an example. When Zelensky is considering a peace deal with Russia, and they work out the Istanbul agreements, they have the contours and framework of an agreement. And then the US comes in, or Boris Johnson says, hey, cut it out. Okay, a sovereign country, if it indeed wanted a deal, would have taken the deal. It, under no circumstances, could, because the Western powers and the US didn't want it to. Meaning,
Sure.
it didn't have
all that means is that the country is weak. It's a politically weak country. If the international community recognizes it as an independent sovereign nation and it is seated at the United Nations, then it's an independent sovereign nation, whether it's weak or strong or subject to, a bully that lives in the neighborhood. It's still a sovereign country. It's internationally recognized. The Russians recognized it as a sovereign country. They exchanged ambassadors with it.
Mhm. I agree up to the point where they were overthrown in 2014. Like, meaning after 2014, that sovereignty was gone. Yes, in name, they're a sovereign country. And yes, they're sitting in the UN as a quote unquote sovereign country. But that sovereignty is in quotes at best, especially now
Well,
where.
you say, but who makes that determination when it
No,
comes to
that's
peace
fair.
talks?
That's a fair point. I'm a random guy, right? I'm a random guy. John, thank you for this, man. I really appreciate this. I always
Anytime.
appreciate these conversations. You be
My
safe.
pleasure.
By the way,
Thank you,
again,
sir.
where can people find you? One more time. I do this twice because I want, people to get it
Thanks.
on both ends.
I'm on YouTube under Deep Program, YouTube under Deep Focus with John Kiriakou. Speaking tour is listed at tigerslanestudios.com, and Unified Television, UNIFYD.TV. The show is CIA Declassified.
Check John out. Check John out. John, you have a safe day, safe trip, wherever you're
Thank you.
going. Be safe, my
Thank you.
man. Thank you for this.
All the best.